A two-story White House stands in a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Boston. In the well-maintained garden, roses that Dorothy, my mother-in-law, had lovingly tended were blooming beautifully. The scent of lavender planted along the red brick walkway wafted on the early summer breeze. 5 years ago, I held my wedding ceremony in the backyard of this house. Under an old maple tree, beneath a white arch, James and I exchanged vows of eternal love amid the warm blessings of our friends. Dorothy fastened around my neck a sapphire necklace that had been passed down from her grandmother. "Kathy, I'm truly delighted to welcome you as a member of our family. This necklace has been worn by Anderson family brides for generations." That day, Dorothy embraced me with a warm smile. It had been just a year since I met James. For me, accompanying him on his overseas assignment, his kindness had been my emotional anchor. And I naturally opened my heart to Dorothy's loving nature, the woman who had raised him. Sunday afternoon tea time was our precious moment together. Dorothy, with the meticulousness of her former nursing profession, would brew tea and serve homemade scones. The sight of steam rising from the white porcelain teapot against the lace tablecloth was as beautiful as a painting. "I trained in England, you know." When I was young, Dorothy would say, her profile reflecting nostalgic memories. Under her guidance, I gradually learned to cook American home-style dishes. The Thanksgiving turkey and Christmas apple pie, all these recipes I learned from my mother-in-law are my treasures. "Your pot roast seasoning is perfect now. You'll make a wonderful mother someday." Just as I was basking in such praise, Dorothy's health took a sudden turn. It happened while she was tending to the garden. She suddenly complained of a headache and collapsed on the spot. Though her life was saved, she was left with paralysis on her right side and needed rehabilitation. In the white hospital room, my mother-in-law apologized in a small voice. "Kathy, I'm sorry for causing such trouble. Mom, please focus on your treatment. I'll be right here with you." At those words, Dorothy showed a weak but relieved expression. From then on, I visited the hospital between work hours, accompanying her to rehabilitation. The steady training in the rehab room, wheelchair walks, assistance with meals, though everything was a new experience, my desire for Dorothy's recovery kept me going. Meanwhile, James and his sister Maggie rarely showed up, citing work as their reason. Even when they did visit, they would only stay briefly in the hospital room before leaving. Still, I didn't mind. Rather, I was determined to do whatever I could. During this time, a large-scale project in Asia came up. A 2-year long-term assignment based in Singapore. It was a huge opportunity for my career. However, I was hesitant to make a decision, worried about Dorothy. "Leave Mother to me." James said this and arranged for Green Garden Care, a high-end nursing facility. The facility had a good reputation and offered 24-hour nursing care. I paid a year's worth of facility fees up front and made all possible preparations. On the day of my departure, Dorothy clasped my hand and said, "Have a good trip, Kathy. I'm supporting your dreams. I know you'll do wonderfully." At those words, I bowed deeply while holding back tears. I believed that when I returned, I would see my mother-in-law in better health. 42nd floor of a high-rise office building in Singapore. Beyond the window, the setting sun cast golden light across Marina Bay. Having finished a 12-hour meeting with the project team, I sank my tired body into my chair. On my desk, mountains of documents still awaited review. For nearly 2 years, my life had been consumed by work. Waking at 5 a.m., working until late at night. Traveling across Asian countries, Japan, Korea, China. Even amid such intense work, there were times when I thought of home. Kathy, another brilliant presentation today. Isn't your promotion to Asia Regional Head pretty much guaranteed now? My colleague Linda patted my shoulder as she spoke. Indeed, the project was going well. Our expansion in the Asian region was exceeding expectations, and headquarters evaluation was high. New contract values had achieved triple the target, and my career was on a steep upward trajectory. However, behind that success, I had lost something precious. By the time I left the office, night had already fallen. The cityscape visible from the taxi window glowed like a sleepless city with LED advertisements and high-rise building lights. As the driver played local radio at low volume, I closed my tired eyes. Before I knew it, it had been quite a while since I'd received a call from Dorothy. Though we had regular calls for the first 6 months, they had gradually ceased. Perhaps she had grown accustomed to facility life and became reluctant to make calls. When I returned to my service apartment, the usual pile of mail awaited me. With the time difference and intense work schedule, I tended to put off checking mail. Among the mail neatly sorted by the building manager in my mailbox, one letter from an official institution caught my eye. The sender was the Massachusetts Registry of Probate. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the letter. Inside was a copy of Dorothy Anderson's death certificate and documents regarding inheritance procedures. The date of death was shockingly 8 months ago. That day, I had been in Shanghai giving an important presentation and securing a major contract. Right at the moment, we were celebrating our team's success. This must be some mistake? I muttered to myself, but the cold type on the official document presented the stark reality. Cause of death, heart failure. Was she alone at the end? Or was someone by her side? I look at the clock on the wall. Taking up my mobile phone, I call my husband James. It's 9 p.m. in Singapore, which means 9 a.m. in Boston. Usually the time he'd be heading to work. He should definitely answer. After 3 rings, James's voice came through the receiver. Not his usual gentle tone, but something carrying a strangely cold resonance. James, what is this about? Mother passed away? A moment of silence on the other end. Then came an unexpectedly cold voice. Yes, that's quite old news now. His tone was as if speaking of a stranger. My heart began to race. I felt cold sweat on my palms. Why didn't you tell me? You're not real family. My sister and I have already divided the inheritance. I caught my breath at those words. On the other end of the phone, James continued in a businesslike tone. Mother apparently waited for you until the end. But you wanted to succeed overseas, didn't you? Work was more important, wasn't it? Anger welled up at those words. At the same time, all the uncomfortable feelings I hadn't noticed before came flooding out. Dorothy's letters, which should have been coming regularly, had stopped for the past 6 months. Phone calls always met with the response, "Mother is resting." But even stronger than these concerns was the anxiety that gripped my chest. What had happened to Dorothy, who should have been at Green Garden Care? With trembling hands, I called the facility. However, the operator's response was far beyond my expectations. I'm sorry. Mrs. Anderson was transferred to another facility, Riverside Nursing Home, 8 months ago. Transferred? On whose authority? At the family's request, according to our records, with the signatures of Mr. James Anderson and Ms. Margaret Anderson. My heart was enveloped in pitch darkness. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, taking a bottle of mineral water from the refrigerator. Though my throat was parched, I couldn't even swallow water. In my mind, past events raced by like a fleeting dream. The happy smiles at the wedding. Sunday tea time. Rehabilitation at the hospital. And the farewell before my assignment. Everything felt like a distant dream. Opening the airline website on my smartphone, I made a firm decision while booking a return flight. This wasn't just about family betrayal. Something more serious was lurking behind these events. Taking a photograph from my desk drawer, Dorothy embracing me with a smile on my wedding day. I questioned those kind eyes. I will uncover what happened in your final days. While packing only the essentials in my suitcase, various questions swirled in my mind. Why did James and Maggie change facilities? What happened to the facility fees I had paid? And above all, what thoughts did Dorothy hold in her final moments? Kathy, what about the project? The next morning, Linda worriedly called out to me at the office. On my desk lay the proposal I had been desperately working on until the night before. I answered briefly. It's a family emergency. I'll be back soon. When I parked my car in the Green Garden Care Center parking lot, my heart was filled with an odd tension. Seasonal flowers bloomed at the facility's main entrance. It was the same scene as when I had visited with Dorothy before. Could I speak with the facility director in charge of Mrs. Anderson? When I gave my name at reception, a middle-aged female staff member quietly nodded. Behind her words, "Please wait a moment," I sensed some heavy atmosphere. Facility Director Sarah Thompson was a seemingly mild-mannered woman. Shown to her office, I first inquired about the circumstances of the facility transfer. Yes, last year's change was very sudden. She furrowed her brow while pulling out old files. Mr. Anderson and Ms. Anderson suddenly came, saying they would move her to a facility closer to home. We objected, but given it was the family's wishes. Why did you object? Because Mrs. Dorothy's condition was stable. Her rehabilitation was progressing well, showing improvement. Especially in the garden therapy program, she showed remarkable progress. Sarah's words trailed off. She took a photograph from her desk drawer. It showed Dorothy smiling while tending to roses. The photo was taken just a week before the transfer. Mother's expression was indeed vibrant. After looking around, Sarah continued in a low voice. Actually, a few days before the transfer, Mrs. Dorothy came to consult with me. She said, "Something seems wrong with my son and daughter-in-law." My heart raced at those words. What do you mean? She asked me to check her bank book. It seems large sums were being regularly withdrawn from Mrs. Dorothy's account. She said they were withdrawals she couldn't remember making. According to records, over $10,000 was being withdrawn monthly from Dorothy's personal account. Moreover, most were cash withdrawals. The facility fees I had paid should have been in a separate dedicated account. Do you have security camera records? Yes, we've kept them. They show ATM withdrawals. The monitor clearly showed Maggie's figure. She was repeatedly making withdrawals using Mother's bankbook and cash card. After the transfer, I tried to visit Mrs. Dorothy, but Sarah bit her lip regretfully. The new facility denied visits, citing family instructions as the reason. Next, I headed to Riverside Nursing Home. In stark contrast to Green Garden Care, it was a bleak building. The entrance plants were withering, and paint was peeling from the walls in places. I'm sorry. According to our records, Mrs. Anderson passed away 8 months ago. The receptionist answered curtly. However, I didn't give up. Could I speak with the nurse who was in charge at the time? After a short wait, a young nurse named Maria Garcia appeared. Though initially cautious, she gradually opened up to my sincere attitude. Mrs. Dorothy seemed very lonely. In the break room, Maria began speaking quietly. She waited for her daughter every day. She would say, "Kathy is doing important work in Asia. She'll surely come back." Those words constricted my chest. But her condition rapidly deteriorated. At our facility, which can only provide basic care, we couldn't adequately respond. According to Maria's testimony, Dorothy gradually became unable to eat and became bedridden. Even so, neither James nor Maggie visited frequently. On her final day, Maria's words caught in her throat. Mrs. Dorothy had hidden a letter under her pillow. But when Mr. Anderson came to clean out the room, he took away all her belongings. My next destination was the hospital where Mother had last been admitted. Though it would take time to get her medical records released, I could meet with her primary physician at the time. That transfer was clearly inappropriate. Dr. Richardson spoke in strong terms. I strongly objected. But the family cited financial reasons, saying Mrs. Anderson's savings had run out. Those words connected something in my mind. Maggie's unauthorized withdrawals, the facility transfer, and the plundering of the inheritance. Behind it all, there seemed to be calculated intent. The last place I visited was the law office of Mother's primary care attorney. Benjamin Cohen listened intently to my story. This is clearly a violation of property rights, he declared while reviewing the evidence documents. Misappropriation of facility fees, unauthorized bank withdrawals, and unjust facility transfer. These are all actions that carry legal responsibility. I spread all the gathered evidence on his desk. Payment records and facility transfer documents from Green Garden Care. Copies of Dorothy's bankbook and ATM withdrawal video records. Nursing records showing poor treatment at the new facility. And medical records indicating rapid deterioration of her condition. With this much evidence, a civil suit is fully viable. Depending on circumstances, we could even consider criminal charges. Cohen continued his explanation while writing calculations on paper. The total facility fees you paid were about $150,000. Unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Anderson's account total about $120,000. And the inheritance property is about $80,000. Together, these amount to over $350,000. Outside the window, the evening sky was turning red. I steeled my resolve. This wasn't just about money. It was about judgment for unforgivable acts that trampled on the final dignity of someone precious. I'm ready to confront them, I told Cohen. Dorothy's smiling face in the photo frame seemed to be supporting my determination. Yes, all the evidence is in place. Their actions are now beyond excuse. I quietly nodded at Cohen's words. The roses had withered at the White House where we once spent happy days, and weeds had overtaken the untended garden. I sat on the living room sofa and spread the evidence documents on the table. The file received from Attorney Cohen had all evidence organized chronologically. Records of the facility fees I paid, captured images from ATM withdrawal videos, facility transfer documents, and nursing records detailing Mother's final days. Above the fireplace where wedding photos were displayed hung Dorothy's memorial portrait. I quietly spoke to that gentle smile. Today is the day to reveal the truth. The doorbell rang, and first to appear was my sister-in-law Maggie. Her usual haughty attitude was subdued, and she seemed somehow unsettled. "I never thought you'd really come back," she muttered softly. I only gave her a cold look in response. James arrived next, wearing his usual navy suit. Though anxiety showed in his expression, he even tried to maintain a composed appearance. "Your sudden return is surprising. Is the project all right?" His tone was as if nothing had happened. However, he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. "Sit down," I commanded quietly but with authority. They silently took seats on the sofa. They anxiously eyed the mountain of documents spread on the table. "Would you explain about Mother's death?" James forced a smile. "As I already told you. While you were overseas." "Stop lying." At my words, both their expressions tensed. "These are the records from Green Garden Care." I showed the first document. Mother's condition was improving. Rehabilitation was progressing well. "So why did you move her to a cheaper facility?" As Maggie tried to speak, I cut her off. "And this." I spread out prints of the ATM withdrawal footage. "You were regularly withdrawing large sums from Mother's account, weren't you, Maggie?" "That was..." Her voice trembled. "It was an account entrusted to me. For Mother's care." "Really?" I showed the next piece of evidence. Nursing records from the substandard facility. "You moved her to a facility that couldn't even provide basic care, so where did the withdrawn money go?" The air in the room seemed to freeze instantly. As James tried to stand, I restrained him with a stern look. "I'm not finished." I took out the lawyer's report. The total care fees I paid amount to more than triple the inheritance. This constitutes fraud. At that moment, the color drained from both their faces. "Fraud." Maggie's voice cracked. "Wait, Kathy." James's voice no longer held any composure. "This is all a misunderstanding. For Mother's sake." "For Mother's sake?" My voice rose slightly. "Look at this record." I spread out the nursing diary from the last facility. She waited for her daughter Kathy's return every day. She would cry while looking at photos. "Is this what you did for Mother's sake?" Maggie broke down crying. "We had debts." Those words solved all the mysteries. Gambling? Or failed investments? James's expression told the whole story. A real estate investment failed. He continued, hanging his head. "We borrowed against Mother's savings, but the market crashed." "So you changed Mother's facility and misappropriated the fees I paid?" The answer lay in their silence. Outside, darkness had completely fallen. Street lights cast faint shadows in the room. "I could report this to the police," I stated calmly. "Fraud, embezzlement, and possibly criminal negligence resulting in death. The lawyer says prison time is possible." "Please, no." Maggie's voice was like a scream. "There is a way to settle." I took out the final document. 3 conditions. First, full repayment of the misappropriated facility fees and unauthorized withdrawals. Second, return all of Mother's belongings. And third, I stood up and looked at the memorial portrait above the fireplace. Erect a new gravestone for Mother. One that bears the names of those who truly loved her. Heavy silence fell over the room. If we can pay in installments, it's possible. James answered in a trembling voice. We can discuss a monthly repayment plan with the lawyer. And this. Maggie held out a small envelope. Mother's last letter. I've been keeping it. The envelope bore my name in my mother-in-law's handwriting. However, I didn't try to open it. Come to the lawyer's office tomorrow. We'll work out the details there, I said quietly. After they left, deep silence filled the house. Dorothy's memorial portrait above the fireplace seemed to wear a different expression than before. Not one of sadness or anger, but rather a kind of peace. Outside, the full moon peeked through the clouds. I held Mother's letter to my chest and offered a quiet prayer. Sunlight streams into my new office in Cambridge, where the Charles River flows peacefully outside the window. On my desk sits a new business card reading, Kathy Anderson, Senior Care Consultant. A year has passed since then. My life has changed dramatically. After finalizing my divorce, I've begun walking a new path. Drawing on my experience as an international consultant, I've launched a consulting company for elderly care facilities. Ms. Anderson, preparations for the next meeting are complete. My secretary Jenny hands me the meeting materials. Today's client is a medical group planning to open a new care facility in the Boston suburbs. They've shown strong interest in my proposed facility management that values family bonds. Thank you. Oh, what about the volunteer work at 3 p.m.? Yes, I've confirmed the schedule for the garden therapy at Green Garden Care. I nodded with satisfaction. The monthly garden therapy sessions are precious time connecting me to memories of Mother. While tending roses with the facility residents, I sometimes share stories about her. You still haven't opened your mother's letter? To Jenny's question, I answered with a smile. No, not yet. But maybe soon. Mother-in-law's letter still sleeps in my study drawer. It's not that I lacked the courage to open it. I just wanted to wait until I had grown a bit more before receiving her words. The photo of the new gravestone has arrived. Opening the email from the stonemason, I see a photo of a gravestone that is simple yet dignified. The text engraved in white marble glows with a soft light. Dorothy Anderson, 1956 to 2024. Beloved mother, nurse, and guardian angel. Forever in our hearts, your loving daughter, Kathy. Beside the gravestone are roses that Mother loved, a special variety cultivated by Green Garden Care's gardener. Opening my desk drawer, I see the settlement progress report. James's real estate license has been suspended, and he's in the process of seeking new employment. Maggie lost her financial advisor credentials and reportedly moved to Chicago. The monthly repayments have continued without delay so far. Ms. Anderson, your guests have arrived. On my way to the conference room, I noticed the award hanging on the wall, Best Senior Care Consultant of the Year. Though I started this new work because of Mother's death, that experience was definitely contributing to society. Everyone, thank you for waiting. Entering the conference room where the medical group executives waited, I take a deep breath and begin my presentation. Today, I'd like to talk about care that preserves family bonds. The slides show photos of garden therapy at Green Garden Care. Residents smiling while appreciating flowers. Families gently staying close by their sides. Facility care should never sever family bonds. Rather, it should be an opportunity to nurture bonds in new ways. After the presentation, I stopped by Mother's grave. I placed a bouquet that I'll use for weekend volunteer work before her grave. Mom, I'm doing my best. The wind gently rustles the flower petals. It feels as if Mother is stroking my head. That night, I picked up Mother's letter after a long while. The envelope still faintly carries the scent of her favorite perfume. Taking a deep breath, I gently break the seal. To my beloved daughter, Kathy. By the time you read this letter, I will no longer be in this world. But please don't be sad. My life was filled with love and happiness. As a nurse, I touched many people's lives, was blessed with a wonderful son, and gained you as my beloved daughter. Especially the days spent with you were treasures of my life. Please forgive James and Maggie. They too are lost sheep. The time will surely come when they realize their mistakes. I hope your kindness can be their guiding light. And may your new life be filled with light. I will always watch over you from heaven. With love. Mother. Tears roll down my cheeks. But they aren't tears of sadness. My heart fills with warmth from Mother's love and guidance. The next morning, I headed to the office earlier than usual. The calendar on my desk is filled with various appointments. New facility consulting, staff training, volunteer activities. And next month, I would begin teaching at a graduate school for care facility management. Mom, the path I've chosen wasn't wrong, was it? Outside the window, the morning sun reflects off the Charles River, casting a brilliant light. On my desk, a photo frame. My smiling face next to Mother on my wedding day. Next to it, a new photo has been added, a group picture taken with residents during volunteer activities at Green Garden Care. It was proof that the form of love I learned from Mother was surely being passed on to the next generation. In my heart, Mother's final words quietly echo. Living for those you love. Perhaps that's the best revenge. I nodded deeply and turned to the work of a new day. Outside the window, the spring breeze gently rustled the trees.